Hello and welcome back to my channel, Israel. Before we get started, and if you are new here, then please subscribe, like and comment on this video. The video I'm about to share is very interesting, especially if you have been following the Israel versus Palestine war. Talk more of the new case concerning this issue, which is South Africa filing a lawsuit against Israel on allegations of committing a genocide to the people of Gaza at the International Court of Justice. Now, following what happened on Thursday, the 11th of January, which is South Africa presenting arguments before the ICJ court, where people were praising South Africa to say it went prepared. Some even liked how the South African lawyers gave an incredible speech accusing Israel of genocide at ICJ. But in this video, we talk about everything you need to know about Israel's defense. Now, to start with, you might be wondering why the BBC and most British broadcasting agencies in general weren't covering South Africa's trial. Despite this, Sky News and the BBC were both live streaming Israel's defense. What's all this propaganda all about? Why broadcast only one side of the story? And those who are reporting on Israel's defense are giving a distorted perception of the proceedings. UK broadcasting institutions literally refuse to report about the other side of what's happening. Is this being neutral? Of course not. But check out this lady's video for more context.
So this morning, I, like millions of others, watched the Israeli defense of the South Africa charge of committing genocide. And again, I, like millions of others, have so many thoughts. But at the start of my previous video, I pointed out how the BBC and most British broadcasting agencies in general weren't covering South Africa's trial. However, today, Sky News and the BBC were both live streaming Israel's defense. I honestly hope that everyone that follows me and everyone that interacts with my page, or if you're even seeing this video, understands what this means. Because this isn't even like framing South Africa's like side of things in a negative way. This is just like propaganda by omission. UK broadcasting institutions refuse to report about the other side of what's going on. Through only reporting on Israel's defense, they are giving a distorted perception of the proceedings of what's happening to the British public in general. Which, like, this isn't impartial, only giving one side. This isn't being neutral. This isn't reporting journalism as it happens. This is only showing the Israeli defense. And the BBC live streamed it. But anyway, for those of us that weren't lucky enough to watch it, it was a clusterfuck. Not only did Israel start off the proceedings by saying that South Africa have close personal ties to Hamas, but they also again repeated the claim that South Africa are acting on behalf of Hamas. They also utilised, weaponized identity politics and social media, saying that in like this day and age we reach for the thing that's most outrageous and then charge that, but that truth and like the prevalence of truth, especially in the highest court of the land, matters most. And then they continued a preamble of completely unsubstantiated claims. And I say this because, like many of you, we've literally been on the internet like watching this unfold for the past 3 months. And time again, there's been things Israel have said that have been debunked by the global community. But today, for some reason, Israel decided to repeat like thousands of claims. In response to claims that Israel have been carpet in Gaza, dropping like 2,000 bombs and basically dumb bombs across the entirety of like residential areas, Israel insisted that no, this destruction was due to Hamas booby traps. They showed photos, if you can even call them that, of Hamas operating outside of hospitals, UN schools in general, residential areas, and repeated this bizarre phrasing of human shields. And that kind of sums up the entirety of the Israeli defense in the fact that they didn't ever say, oh, we're not committing genocide. They kind of justified the acts in general. But you might see lots of political pundits basically say that Israel are trying to get off on a technicality. And in fact, they started their argument with this British guy talking about jurisprudence, which I didn't even understand what that was until I read about it. And from what I understand, it's basically the things that happen in the build up to the court case. And they're arguing that because the International Criminal Court operates between a dispute, they argued that South Africa and Israel weren't in a dispute because the emails and notices sent, there wasn't enough conversation before they went to trial. So basically you have to be actively arguing or in a dispute with the state before you can even come in front of the International Criminal Court. And they argued basically that South Africa notified them that they were going to do this, but that they hadn't within diplomatic channels had enough conversation. Therefore, they haven't had a dispute, therefore they can't be in front of the International Criminal Court, ergo you can't rule that we're committing genocide because this court doesn't have jurisdiction because there wasn't enough dispute beforehand. You see how even I'm explaining it and I'm getting confused? It was a technicality. It might have been one of the strongest elements of their case, however. But that's not saying much because the rest of the trial was insane. I'm going to make a separate video on the British guy up twice because his speech was out of order. But yesterday South Africa did incredibly well to basically connect all genocidal things that we've seen ministers saying with soldiers on the ground through video evidence, through quotes, basically saying that it was fundamentally understood within Israel as they're enacting genocide, that everyone understood that they were enacting genocide because of the things the ministers were saying. But the Israeli lawyers basically said that it's free speech, and what they said was really bad and albeit genocidal, but like they were just allowed to say it. Like, yeah, the culture minister or the heritage minister said like Gaza and destroy the entirety of Gaza, but he's not connected to the war council, so it doesn't matter. They also tried to say that Hamas are the ones committing genocide, which was crazy, and they centered a lot of their narrative over the hostages on October 7th, saying that this started on October 7th and that's the context from which we can draw. While South Africa said, no, this started in 1948, and that is the wider context that we have to understand, is that this is not an isolated incident, but history is in the making. And then they essentially cited a bunch of case law about other sides where the court ruled with the overarching goal of their defence, from my understanding, is basically not saying, oh, we're not genocide or there's no genocide taking place, but that they're allowed to continue to do these genocidal things within this specific context. And they tried to continuously say that they were letting humanitarian aid in, that they were getting things to hospitals, that there was like water and like infrastructure still available, but that Hamas take it and Hamas operate in hospitals and Hamas are doing this and Hamas. I think someone did like a toll of like how many times they said Hamas, and it was crazy. But throughout the entire proceedings, they kept using phrases like, oh, we're allowing aid in, or we're allowing water in, or we're allowing people to pass through the border, And that was the crux of the South African argument, is that you are an occupying nation, you are an occupying power. Therefore, you don't have this right to self-defense if you get attacked because you're occupying. So I don't know why they said that. But the case study thing was pretty horrific because they basically kept citing to other times that genocide was committed, and like basically saying, oh, well, these people committed genocide and you let them off, so why are you like coming after us? And the thing that was like least surprising is the fact that they quoted Netanyahu like repeatedly, and even his statements that he made 2 days ago, and they were like, yeah, see, we're not committing genocide because 2 days ago Netanyahu said that we're not committing genocide, as if he didn't make those statements in light of the trial that was happening the day after. So yeah, after watching South Africa's trial, I was fairly confident anyway because I thought they did a brilliant job.
Now here's what happened. Israel laid out its defense against charges of genocide at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The legal advisor of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs presented Israel's opening statements, arguing that South Africa had ignored the events of October 7 and that Israel had the right to defend itself. Now Becker also stated that the court should apply provisional measures against South Africa, accusing it of maintaining close ties with Hamas. Now, a British professor of international law then took the floor. He argued against South Africa's claim the two countries were in a dispute, instead labeling it an dispute. Acting director of the International Justice Division at Israel's Justice Ministry then spoke after a short coffee break. She blamed Hamas for the high civilian toll in Gaza and asserted that Israel had not bid hospitals. Now, Christopher Stecker, an international lawyer previously on the criminal tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, was Israel's fourth representative. He claimed Israel had facilitated humanitarian aid. Israel's Deputy Attorney General for International Affairs presented Israel's final arguments. He argued against the use of provisional measures, listing several reasons, including that Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by Israel and other countries and had committed a large-scale terrorist attack. We should expect a ruling from the court in favor of or against South Africa's urgent request for provisional measures in a few weeks. The Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, a legal think tank, has said on X that Israel's contention that the intention to destroy a people in a whole or in part was totally lacking rings hollow in light of the overwhelming evidence of genocidal rhetoric from senior Israeli officials, journalists, and Israeli military and society. Here is what they posted on X. Israel contends that the intention to destroy a people in whole or in part is totally lacking. Mr. Becker's words, however, ring hollow in light of the overwhelming evidence of genocidal rhetoric from senior Israeli officials, journalists, and Israeli military and society. Jewish-Polish lawyer Rael Lemkin coined the term genocide in the 1940s and helped make it an international crime. Israeli rape at the ICJ, in his opening remarks, mentions Rael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide. Here is the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention. The Lemkin Institute calls on the International Crime Court to indicate Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as Israeli PM for the crime of genocide in light of the siege and B of Gaza and the many expressions of genocidal intent, especially his deleted tweet from the 17th of October 2023. Now, the Director General of South Africa's Ministry of International Relations strongly denied the allegation made by Israel's foreign minister. South Africa is functioning as the legal arm of Hamas. South Africa's legal team represents the people of South Africa. Dango said after the ICJ hearing, adding his country is pursuing the genocide case at the ICJ because we want to stop more harm to Palestinians and it is in the interest of justice. Dango also denied Israeli claims that South African officials praised Hamas following its October 7 attack, saying it is something we reject with contempt. Now, speaking to reporters outside the ICJ in The Hague, Palestinian Foreign Ministry official says Israel's legal team was not able to provide any solid arguments on the basis of fact and law. What Israel has provided are many of the already debunked lies, he added, referring to, among others, Israeli claims that hospitals in Gaza were being used as military bases. Additionally, we think that what the Israeli team today has tried to provide is the exact thing that South Africa came to the court for, and that is nothing at all justifies genocide. Now, the ICJ is likely to see a massive disconnect between the picture Israel painted of its humanitarian concern for Gaza and the reality on the ground, where UN agencies say people are starving, lacking water, seeing attacks on hospitals, schools and universities, says a senior lecturer in state crime at Queen Mary University of London. I think the court will find it very difficult to add these two things, countering the Israeli team's case that Israeli decision makers have not shown genocidal intent towards Palestinians, pointed to numerous statements by Israeli leaders documented in South Africa's submission to the court that suggested otherwise. Now, the court only needs to look at the statements in South Africa's submissions with the ranking and authority of those making them and ask whether they plausibly reach the level of intent required for genocide. I think the court will have to do that, he said. Now, self-defense is no answer to genocide, says South Africa's Justice Minister. South Africa's Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, just spoke to members of press outside the ICJ. Here are the main points from his interaction. Israel failed to disprove South Africa's compelling case that was presented. Israel tells the court that these statements read out by senior Israeli political, military and civilian society leaders are simply rhetorical, and we shall not ascribe them any importance. There is no debate about what Prime Minister Netanyahu's term Amalek means and how it is understood by soldiers fighting on the ground and by the Israelis. How can you ignore Netanyahu's statement, the statement of the defense minister and the ground forces? That is a clear implementation of policy. Israel chose today to focus extensively on the events of October 7. South Africa has ignored this event that Israel alleged because it has unequivocally condemned and continues to condemn October 7. Self-defense is no answer to genocide. Nothing can ever justify genocide. Now, Israel's lawyer made comparison with Bosnian genocide case. Christopher Stecker argued that the court should not grant South Africa's request for a pause in Israel's operation because the ICJ did not order an end to military activity during the Bosnian genocide. As we heard the arguments made by Israel that there's no genocide taking place in Gaza, the crowd outside was chanting, "We charge you with genocide." Palestinian activists have been running live commentary on what you've been hearing from the Israeli side. The accounts Israel has been presenting for this court have been debunked by activists who gathered here from many parts of the world. Now, they were saying when Israel was showing pictures of incubators, it was after Aljezeera hospital was besieged. People who are here believe South Africans are on the right side of history and everyone standing with Israel is complicit. Now, Aljezeera senior political analyst says that throughout the hearing, Israel lost the moral, factual, historical, and humanitarian argument because of the way the situation was unraveled in Gaza. Now, Israel's main defense was that its actions were self-defense against Hamas attack on October 7. And surprisingly, we heard a very long argument about how atrocious these attacks were. They showed pictures of the hostages, and they also mentioned that South Africa didn't mention anything about this on the first day of the hearing on Thursday, and that was misleading, a word that was mentioned many times. In terms of the intent, which is a very important issue to prove that Israel indeed has the intent to commit genocide against the people of Gaza, the argument by Israel was that it was clearly not government policy, according to them. Although South Africa mentioned a number of statements by Israeli officials, Israel also pointed out that it is a rules-based country with a legal system. So everything that goes wrong in Gaza, if crimes are committed, those will be dealt with in the national courts. And finally, the issue of jurisdiction. For a dispute to be here at the ICJ, one of the requirements is that the state that takes a case to this court should try to sort out this problem first. According to Israel, they didn't manage to talk to South Africa before they brought this case to the court, although they tried. Thank you for watching. Kindly share your comments down below.